The haunting of NASA robotics engineer Bill Vaile is a story that has been told among the employees of NASA for many years. Some have dismissed it as nothing more than a rumor or an urban legend, but others believe that there is some truth to the story. Bill Vaile was a respected engineer who worked at the NASA Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Pasadena, California. He was responsible for designing and building robotic spacecraft that explored the depths of space. Vaile was known for his brilliant mind and his dedication to his work, but he was also known for his interest in the paranormal. According to the story, Vaile had always been interested in ghosts and the supernatural. He spent his free time reading books on the subject and visiting haunted locations. He even claimed to have had a few paranormal experiences of his own, although he never provided any concrete evidence to support his claims. One day, Vaile was working on a top-secret project for NASA. He was designing a new type of robotic spacecraft that could explore the surface of Mars. He was completely immersed in his work and spent long hours at the lab, often staying late into the night. It was during one of these late nights that Vaile first experienced the haunting. As he was working alone in the lab, he heard a strange noise. It sounded like a faint whisper, but he couldn't make out what it was saying. Vaile dismissed it as his imagination and continued working. The next night, Vaile heard the same noise again. This time, he was sure that it wasn't his imagination. He searched the lab but found no one there. He was starting to get spooked, but tried to convince himself that it was just a faulty air conditioning system. Over the next few weeks, Vaile continued to hear strange noises in the lab. Sometimes he would hear footsteps approaching him, but when he turned around, there was no one there. Other times he would hear voices whispering in his ear, but he couldn't understand what they were saying. Vaile's colleagues started to notice that he was becoming increasingly nervous and jumpy. He stopped working late into the night and started leaving the lab early. His work began to suffer, and he was no longer making progress on the Mars rover project. One day, Vaile confided in one of his colleagues about the strange noises he had been hearing. His colleague suggested that the lab might be haunted, but Vaile dismissed the idea as ridiculous. However, as the weeks went by, the noises became more frequent and more intense. Vaile was convinced that there was something supernatural going on. Desperate for answers, Vaile started researching the history of the lab. He discovered that the building had once been a hospital during World War II. He also found out that there had been reports of strange occurrences in the hospital, including unexplained footsteps and voices. Vaile began to suspect that the ghost of a former patient was haunting the lab. He started leaving out recording equipment to try to capture the ghostly voices, but he was never able to capture anything substantial. As the haunting continued, Vaile became more and more obsessed with the ghostly presence in the lab. He stopped working altogether and spent all his time trying to communicate with the ghost. He even started conducting seances in the lab in an attempt to contact the spirit. Eventually, Vaile's colleagues became concerned about his mental health. They encouraged him to take a break from work and seek professional help. Vaile reluctantly agreed and took a leave of absence from NASA. When he returned to work several months later, Vaile was a changed man. He no longer spoke of the haunting and seemed to have moved on from his obsession. However, some of his colleagues claimed that they could still hear strange noises coming from the lab late at night, long after Vaile had left for the day. Some even claimed to have seen strange apparitions in the lab, including the ghostly figure of a woman dressed in a hospital gown. The story of the haunting of Bill Vaile has been told and retold among NASA employees for years, and many believe that there is some truth to the tale. While there is no concrete evidence to support the claims of a haunting, the fact that Vaile was a respected engineer and a rational thinker lends some credence to his claims. Furthermore, the history of the building as a former hospital and the reports of strange occurrences during that time add to the credibility of the story. It is possible that the lab is indeed haunted by the ghost of a former patient, drawn to the site by Vaile's interest in the paranormal. In conclusion, While the story of the haunting of NASA robotics engineer Bill Vaile may be dismissed by some as an urban legend or a tall tale, there are those who believe that there is some truth to the story. Bill Vaile was a respected engineer who had no reason to make up such a tale, and the history of the building adds credibility to the claims of a haunting. Whether or not the lab is truly haunted by a ghostly presence remains a mystery, but the story of Bill Vaile and his experiences in the lab continues to fascinate and intrigue those who hear it.